started, guys. Let's go ahead and say welcome to the Beach Club
So,
on this St. Patrick's Day. And what I find to be really interesting is we are meeting at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And so it is weird that today we will not ask on St. Patrick's Day what is in our cups, but unfortunately, I don't think it's what we all want in our cups. What we're going to do is we're very fortunate. We have Dr. Dave Nichols, who's going to be joining us. And Brenda, do you want to do a little tee up on how we got here and why we're here?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really fun. So we're really excited about this conversation. It's going to be a great one. And as Catherine said, Dr. Dave Nicol, Dave, Mr. Roundwood Vet on your thing. Most people are going to know who Dr. Dave Nicol is, and you're just such a hoot, Dave. It's so funny. And so we sat down at WBC and we started talking about mindful medicine and what that means. And your practice is just such a really tremendous, I think, example of what mindful medicine is all about. So really excited to have you here to talk about, the why and the what and the how and your island of excellence. And so it's really a perfect way, I think, to tee up our St. Patty's Day, just with a really both engaging and fun conversation at the same time. So Dave, if you'll kick us off with a toast, and we'll kind of dig into the conversation.
I will. And thank you for having me, first of all. It's my honor and privilege to be here. So I thought about, and I still hadn't made up my mind until 2 seconds ago, which toast I was going to do, but here it is. And it connects to Paddy's Day. It forms a bridge in the spirit of the Bridge Club between Paddy's Day and the sort of stuff that we have going on right now in the world. So I'm going to draw on something that's more Celtic and if I'm being honest, probably more Scottish than Irish. So my toast is simply this: many meikles does a muckle mac, which is a Scottish way of saying lots of littles make a very big. And in moments like this, when we are potentially all certainly over in Europe, getting a little bit frazzled by how quickly things are changing, it's very easy to lose sight of, get stuck in this big and forget that there's a lot of littles that will come together to help you not just survive this, but it will blow over. So many meikles does a muckle mac. That is my toast.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Good one. Great thought.
Very good thought.
All right, so talking about positive thoughts here, let's dig right in. So Dave, you've always been like a really big champion of innovative thinking and getting people to kind of challenge themselves to do things differently within veterinary practice. So, from relationships with the teams to the clients to the whole medical process. So, talk a little bit about how you bring great culture and great medicine to your veterinary practice through that whole island of excellence concept that you kind of pulled together.
So that's probably a great place to start, I think, is where did the island of excellence thought come in my head? And I will say this at the start. I actually don't think that I have very many truly innovative ideas of my own. I just have been, if I have a secret power, it's curiosity, and it's just being willing to go places that others perhaps won't, or willing to engage in conversations that are just being a Labrador and running up to people with a waggy tail and a wet nose. And the metaphor ought to end there, because it doesn't, the nose stays where it's meant to. But it's being that willingness to just go and explore and see things that are perhaps working in places, in different places, sometimes different practices, sometimes outside of the industry. And so I stumbled across the island of excellence phrase for the first time when I was developing a graduate program, and I'm sat in a boardroom in Mumbai, of all places, developing a graduate training program for a practice across there that wants to expand and bring Western style veterinary medicine to India. And it was actually a consultant who's nothing to do with the veterinary industry. He was in the room, and I just had the chance to ask him a bunch of questions about how he sees innovation and development in a country like India, where things are either miles behind and light years behind, and people have nothing, or really pretty advanced, running ahead of the curve. Just there's a lot of innovative stuff, and there's low cost of failure. And this concept of islands of excellence, that's where I sort of stumbled across that. And I thought, well, in amongst the dark sky that can sometimes seem to be veterinary medicine, it felt pertinent that what could I do to do something different? And so I thought, okay, well, I've got a vet practice. why not try and create something that is an island of excellence, that then my other secret power is flapping my gums as a Scotsman, that I can then amplify and sort of force multiply that and project and share some of the things that we're trying out and experimenting with and learning and failing and just not accepting the status quo as the way it has to be or the way it is. And that's kind of where that term island of excellence came from. So I think there's a sort of fearlessness and an understanding that it's all right to try stuff out, and if it breaks, we'll still be fine, because we're in a very resilient industry, when resilient to business errors anyway. So that's kind of where the concept came from. You looked like you were going to ask me something there, Brenda.
No. Someone is communicating with me. They're having trouble getting in, so I'm trying to help. So you carry on.
Okay, I'll carry on then. Okay, so
Dave, actually, so I mean,
Join the Bridge Club. You just have to, go with the flow. We've got, dog's going to be barking soon, so.
Kids running around.
Yes.
So I mean, we always talk about, culturally, that comes from the top, from leaders. So
Yeah.
So is there anything you've had to? I mean, did that come naturally to you to be? Already the shaking of the head. So I mean, what did you have to do, or what did you have to do for yourself to be the top of the island of excellence?
Yeah, so this is a brilliant question, and I would have liked to be able to say, oh yeah, it came completely naturally. As somebody who's quite extroverted and somebody who's got a big gob, and also somebody I was just interested in. Looking back, was just interested in helping make things happen, helping others. And I think when you have that combination of, there are certain things I'm good at, and there's a lot of things I'm very, very average or crap at. And I've gotten to know what those things are quite well. So I tend to, but naturally you gravitate to the things you're a bit better at. And because of that particular grouping of skill sets I think envisaging what solutions might look like a little bit, being able to talk and get on well with people, and that desire to sort of help and create things, it almost drew me into sort of leadership positions, but I sucked. I thought I was good. At the time I thought I was good. I was awful. I was just, and where do we learn our leadership mantras from? Hollywood, gets the girl, kills the baddies, saves the entire planet, just that one person. And you're like, no wonder you're like, boof, boof. Just put everything on your shoulders. It must all go through me. I suffered from, I have a talk which somehow Brenda didn't throw me out of CVC for presenting, called The Recovering Veterinary Asshole.
That's great.
And it's true, because, the role models I had were, my parents, God bless them, love them, Scottish, not the most emotionally intelligent upbringing you could possibly have on this planet. My early bosses, highly talented, extremely good, gifted clinicians, not so gifted communicators and managers, and so lots of hot heads, lots of things like that, and you just learn, that you see it on TV, you see it. It's almost. There's a hero culture around being top of the pyramid type thing. And it's the reverse of what good leadership actually is, and it leads to fairly toxic cultures. And the thing that really drummed it home to me was, if there's two experiences I had, one was when I was leaving my first proper big leadership role in London. And this was a business of about 140 people, and at my leaving party, about 4 people came. And they were really happy I was leaving. They were not drinking with me; they were drinking.
They were coming to make sure you left.
They were going to pack me on the plane and make sure I went. And it wasn't quite that bad, but I thought I had it all buttoned up. But inside, I really knew I didn't. I knew I could make a business grow, but I couldn't do it in a way that was sustainable for me or for them. So there was a little imposter for you right there. But then when I went to Australia, that's when I really thought there has to be a different, better way. And I went on this very deep dive, sort of almost sort of obsession with learning about how to be a better leader. And almost all of that was about learning how to be a better version of me as opposed to a better version of a leader. So a lot of it was just learning, learning what is emotional intelligence? How do you control the thing that your inner voice says and put the filter to there and then reroute it up there so that what comes out your mouth is, you might be thinking, I want to do the Homer Simpson type thing. But actually what comes out your mouth is, that's really sad. Tell me more about what happened there. Right. And learning not to surf the emotional waves and not get some kind of kick out of that. So it was very much a case of I had sucked as a leader. I knew I wasn't doing a great job, but I also felt like there had to be a better way. And so I just found better role models, Jules. And I found wonderful people who helped me greatly. And then the moment I thought, yeah, you did a better job this time around was when I was leaving Australia and everybody came to my leaving drinks. We had about 10 different leaving drinks parties. And it was ugly crying from everybody, man. It was scarring. I'm still sad that I'm not working with those guys because it was the peak of because now I don't work with my clinical team. So they don't know me in the same way. And actually, there's a distance between us, which you don't get when you're working within your team. So.
Yeah, good. Carry on, Dave. No, I was just going to say this is really interesting because you're talking about like those relationships and the working with the clinical team as much as you do now, but you still manage to set like a really culture of excellence, So how do you do that? How do you had a comment that you made to me that I wrote down that I thought was really brilliant. And it's like, medicine shouldn't happen in isolation from the people and the culture.
Yeah.
That's a little bit what you're talking about. You build that culture and that camaraderie and that support team. So how do you do that?
Well, in a sense, it was almost looking at what is done now and why it doesn't work, and then almost just going, well, what's the opposite of that? And actually, that was how I arrived at my first definite. I struggled with what leadership really was because it's one of those very nebulous concepts. It's a little hard to pin down. And so what I did was I was also fortunate enough to work with some really bad leaders as well along the way. And so I just almost used them as character studies, and I wrote down everything they did. And I thought, what would the opposite of that be in this situation? And I arrived at a pretty solid list of, I think it was 10 things on there that just, they were virtues of a leader. And that became my leadership drum kit. I thought, okay, in any given circumstance, I'm going to do the opposite of that, even when it feels like that might be the right thing to do. Because it was a very real way of shifting the camera position off of me being the actor in the movie to me being the director in the movie. And that's a very useful phase change. So in the practice terms, that meant like, okay, so if you look at any corporate website or very many practice websites, there's almost no reference to the people, or they're quite far down the list of things that are important. And then they're very glibly referred to. And of course, our most important ingredient are our amazing people. And you just know the BS radars just spun off of its axis and just exploded. Because if they were the most important thing, it'd be at the top of the statement, the mission statement, because that's where the most important stuff goes. And you also know that culturally, there's a lot of people struggling in organizations now. Now, I'm completely agnostic about ownership. I don't particularly mind whether it's corporate or otherwise. I think there are some great leaders in corporate and there's some lousy leaders in independent. But in my practice, I thought, we are going to build a culture around values, first and foremost. That's the start of it. And not just values, but we're going to take that concept one step further, because most people don't understand what values are, and they've not sat down and thought about what their own personal values are. And when they do that, they come up with a list of things that look good, that sound good. They're good sound bites. But when you actually compare what they're actually doing with what they might have written on a bit of paper, that's where the rubber's meeting the road. That's the real thing. Because what you do are called virtues, not just values. Values are, okay, they're up there, but what actually then you behave, how you behave, that's the virtue. And it's really that one wants to be shooting for. Because culture ultimately, again, is a harder thing to pin down. But what I have come to understand of maybe culture and leadership, and I'll share my definitions of these, but they're both very simple and maybe help people to get a handle on what I mean. But culture is simply the cumulative expression of all the behaviors that happen every day. The words, the language, how we treat each other, the interactions we have with each other, those things are what culture is. Culture is not something you can write down and you can try to capture it, but culture is a sequence of actions and behaviors that are playing out every day. That's what it is in its simplest form, which means, and values drive decisions. Values are what make us make the decisions we have, and virtues are the things we actually are doing. So it's then about saying, okay, what are our ideal values that are going to result in the things we see happening in the clinics every day? And how can we then start to recruit people into our practices that have those and have demonstrated that they have those qualities? And what then can we do to shore that up? How do we make the act of, how do we encourage people to act in that way? So how do we recognize them? How do we reward them? And a lot of it is just put a whole bunch of people who share those values together, and it almost becomes self-reinforcing. Like, people see you doing the right thing, and the organ starts to, or the body starts to reject any reject organs. Like, they show up really fast in a culture where you've got that. So that's a simpler definition of culture as I can give you. But from leadership and management to me are two different things, and they get confused. And I get my phone out when I'm talking about this. So for me, management are like our apps. They're the tools, they're the things you pick up to help people do their work. So if I go on my home screen, then all of these little icons are kind of like management tools, things I can pick up. If I can pick them up, I can be a manager. If I'm bestowed with the power to influence certain areas outside of my technical core that influence others, then I'm a manager. But the operating system that runs this phone, that's leadership. It's how you pick up the tools. It's how you wield things. And so when you think of leadership like that, it all becomes, it's inextricable. You can't separate it from culture. So almost culture is how you, as the leader, your primary responsibility when it comes to your people is, and I'm not talking about strategy, I'm not talking about some of the other elements of leadership, but it's to hire people, it's to work out what the values and the virtues and the behaviors are, and then hire people who would express that, because that's how your culture will come to life. And that's really what we've done with Roundwoods. There's no magic. Like, the building, it's in zone 3 of London. It's on a dodgy street in London. You look at it from the outside, there's nothing special. But when you go in that place and you feel, and we have this thing, like I've said this, and this is not me innovating, this is me borrowing from somebody else or stealing. But I want people to feel the warm embrace of a familiar hug. And I want animals to feel that when they walk in the building as well. So then how do we do that? Well, we hire people who like to do that. We hire people who are warm and cuddly and bouncy and bubbly. We hire people who get on with each other and like each other and will help each other. So there's just a good vibe when people show up in the building. And that's what we hear over and over and over from visiting reps, from people who come in. And, we're doing interviews. I had somebody sitting in an interview with us for 4 hours whilst we went through what we're going to do with the team with all the coronavirus stuff that's going on, how we're bringing telehealth into the practice on a pretty urgent basis. And they just sat there and hung out as the interview just to see what life would really be like. It's completely different.
That's a really cool, I think that really sets the foundation for how you built your practice upon that. So give us an example of how that translates then to the way you guys approach your medicine. I totally, the dumpster fire that is dentistry, and Mary, I'll get a kick out of it. But I love that line too. I mean, I literally wrote that down and circled it because I'm like, that is such a great description, and how you've managed to control that dumpster fire, I think is really fascinating. So love to have to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so when you're putting your people first, then it's not okay for people not to get lunch breaks. It's not okay for people to need to wear an adult diaper so they can go to the toilet. None of those things are cool. So, and when you look at and you start to get a little time working on your business, not so much in it, then you can, one of the values is you can step back and you can look at where the pain points are. And I would hypothesize or theorize to most of you in practice that one of your big pain points is the dental room. And what happens within it. And the problem is the vagary that goes along with that particular procedure. Now, we are a very dental heavy practice. You know, we're focused heavily on wellness. I don't think you can focus on that without being good at dentistry. So we do a lot of dentistry. We've priced for compliance with dentistry to encourage good practice, but we do extractions and things as well. And what we found, and this was an evolution from my hospitals in Australia to my hospital in London, was that you could book a mouth in, and we all know the story. Like, you think it's going to be either a scale and a polish, or you think there's going to be 4 extractions. You get in there, you do your radiographs, and you're like, okay, so there's the dumpster fire catching blaze right there. Now it's 10 extractions. Or you've got the Sheltie and you think, oh, it's going to be a scale and a polish, and it's got 1 resorptive lesion, and you think, oh God. And then you find 20 of them, and they're all ankylosed, and now you're not just not getting lunch, you're not getting home before 9 o'clock, and you've got an animal that's going to be like 30, or, you know, I don't know what the temperature is, and it's like 96 degrees Fahrenheit or something on the table, and you're like, this is a nightmare. And that's when everyone's fetally rocking, and it always happens to the graduate who's no experience whatsoever. So you can avoid all of that when you split the dental in 2. So that was again, not my concept, not my idea, but it was proposed to me and said, listen, have you ever thought about doing that? And I thought, no, that sounds ridiculous. Why would I want to do that? Like, that's surely not safe from an anesthesia point. I said everything everybody still says to me. But then I thought, but what if we could do that? And what if we could, we'd already started grading dentals and doing like a scale and polish that was priced for compliance. But if we found a problem, we would go on and do the surgery at the same time. And when we decided to separate, what we meant was we could control our schedule very, very well, because we could say, right, we're going to do X number of procedures in a day. And when we get the grade 1 dental, we know that's not going to turn into a 3-4 hour operation we weren't expecting, because when we do our radiographs and we do our photographs, and we've done our charting, our COHAT process, we then point that to the right day where we've got enough time to do it and have the right staff on board with the right training to handle that level of procedure. So now we're controlling our stress on the day and our secondary stress on another day. And so and then we're mindful about the booking process in tandem with it. So there's almost 2 components to that. So we split it out, so we can ring fence the dumpster bit and make sure somebody good can do it, or somebody experienced enough can do it. But then we're also mindful about our schedule, and quite oftentimes if the team look like they're flaking a little bit, we'll just go, all right. Or if we're a team member down, we'll go, I know the number of operations per doctor on average I have to do per day. Over the course of a year, it will balance out. And I know the sweet spot I need to be at in order financially to make some money, but also to have the team working optimally, because you don't want them too bored, you don't want them too busy. You know, both things are bad. And I had to change my own thoughts around it to say, what's more important to me now at this stage in my career is far more important to try and show a way of making veterinary medicine sustainable. And does that mean I have to sacrifice some points on the net profit level? It probably does. And I'm okay with that. And that was another kind of mindful decision to say, I'm not okay with it if all I'm doing is burning people out, because the number one thing that I want to be able to demonstrate is that leadership has a really important part to play in making this sustainable for us all.
So I'm sure I'm going to take a quick break here, because I'm sure, Mary, you probably have a question or a comment. I can just tell by the look on your face. And I mean, it's really interesting. I thought you would like this specifically, so I was excited when I saw that you signed up.
Oh, Dave. This might have to be something we talk about over dinner or drinks.
Always a pleasure.
I do agree with you that staging dental procedures would help a lot. I think also, yeah, you're always going to have that, not always, but you can have surprises with dentistry. But I think what it really comes down to is really training the team, whether that be a technician or the veterinarian, on really how to do as thorough awake oral assessment as possible before you get in there. And I know it's not always possible, because we have some of those patients we just can't do that with.
Yeah.
And you know, I've been stuck more times than I can count with that. Oh, we didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
But I do agree that there are times that we should stage them. And I think the hardest part there is just training our clients to accept that. Because like you mentioned, the fear of anesthesia is a huge one. And even to get them over that, just to schedule the dental cleaning, and now I have to schedule another anesthetic protocol in order to get them to treat something. So I see both sides of it, and I know it's becoming much more popular in the dental field is the staging of procedures.
Well, it was interesting, Mary, because I hear you. And that was one of the things I was most concerned about trying it. And that's what we said. We're going to, and communicating in the exam room is probably what I spend, well, not probably, but what I spend almost all of my time working on. And you're right, the anesthesia is kind of the big fear. But that fear factor goes away a lot once you do one successfully for people. And what we found is that we haven't had resistance from clients. The place we've had resistance from are team members on doing it, because they then worry about the resistance from clients. But very few clients have actually come back to us and had any concerns. And listen, if we have an animal who we are very concerned about this animal's anesthesia, it's high risk categorization. We look at that mouth and the right person's doing it, and we can schedule that in the day. We'll do that. So every one of our rules comes with the caveat that there are always exceptions to the rule, and we're okay with that. But we're building systems for the 80%, not for the 20%, which is why let's build systems for the wrong percents. We're all inherently tuned into the 1% of clients that complain, but we don't remember the 90, or maybe there's only 5% that ever say a nice thing, but it doesn't stick with us.
No, and that's very true. And I think you really hit the nail on the head. A lot of it comes to client communication and client education. Yeah. And once we get through that, because I mean, one of the studies I've looked at, really, fear of anesthesia is pretty far low on the list of why people don't schedule dental procedures. Yeah. And everybody says it's cost, and actually that's even lower than fear of anesthesia. It's just they don't understand the
100%.
value of the procedure. So when we have people who are very well trained in communication, it makes a huge difference.
Well, and that was the other thing that we found that we were almost, when you book them in and you've done your estimate of costs, and they, you have that conversation, you're like, so my estimate was going to be $600-700, and I'm not quite right about that. Actually, it's going to be $1,500 or whatever. And I found that I was rarely within 10% of my estimate, which was with dentistry. I started giving wild ranges because I simply couldn't get it accurate enough with visual inspection. And that was after 17 years of doing dentistry. And I'm not boarded, but I trained with Lisa Malella, I trained with Cedric Tutt, I trained with Norman Johnson, like a lot of good people. I'm like, man, if I'm struggling to get this right, how am I going to teach my graduates to get this right? So what we found was the client communication bit improves, because what we're doing is we're sending them home with photographs and with x-rays compared to normal. And now when perhaps the person bringing the animal into the clinic goes home and they have that conversation with the other family member, now they're not just shooting in the dark and going, hey, I had to make a decision, it was $700 more expensive. And I wonder about how that the biggest concern I have is long-term trust. Like I'm betting on a long game here that trust wins out, short-term and long-term. And I want to maintain that trust as every opportunity I can. Now, the other concern I had was, okay, I always believed anesthesia, the really dangerous bits were the takeoff and landing, like planes. And obviously we lose a lot, 50% of animals are lost in recovery because of when they're not monitored, once after extubation back in the kennels. But the vast majority of them are succumbing to getting cold, and it's longer anesthetics that do that. And so I spoke with Sheila Robertson. I always feel like Sheila should have the wonderful in front of her name because she is. And I said, Sheila, I want you to call BS on this if you think I'm doing something wrong. And she agreed. Like it's these animals have got a lot of water sprays around them. They've got longer procedures, and for a lot of these animals are older animals as well. So she was very supportive of it. So we feel, and I know it's not for everybody, but we feel like it's worked well for us, and we've been doing it now we instituted it almost straight away in the practice. So that's 4 years of doing it this way, and we're pretty comfortable and happy with it. But there's a lot of hurdles for you to overcome. And you do, Mary, you're exactly right. Communication is absolutely key.
And I love to hear the keeping the animal warm. I love that.
I'd love to pivot just quickly if we can, because I know
Yeah.
we are very quickly running out of time, is I did want to talk a little bit about, as you talk to other people or you encounter other practices that so desperately want to evolve the day-to-day way that their employees teach one another, i.e. per the culture, but always have that negative energy. What are you encouraging? Are you activating, those defenders of the values? And like, for really solutions oriented for that toxic practice, like because it seems that you've been able to really create this amazing, but what can they do?
Well, I mean, the phrase oft used is "the fish stinks from the head down," and the toxic practice is.
Nobody uses that phrase.
Is that just a British thing?
I think so.
Okay, but I'm imagining it in quite a vivid picture, right? Like the practice culture that is toxic, it's still a culture that it has been inadvertently curated. It didn't just show up by, it's not the default culture. It's the culture where ego is rife. It's the culture where blame is probably the number one thing that afflicts practices. And blame is often, it can show up. Blame is a fear associated thing. I'm afraid of being found out. I'm afraid of somebody yelling at me. I'm afraid of not having my job. I'm afraid of having less power. So, but a lot of practices have a culture, and this is set by the leaders, where I get it. They're stressed. They're moving fast. Something goes wrong, and it's the snarky comment. It's the yelling at somebody, or the throwing of syringes across the prep room. Those moments are incredibly toxic, and they set the tone. And there's no amount of later apologizing or tiptoeing around or buying everybody pizza as a band-aid that makes up for that. For a culture to be healthy, it starts with the leader at the top. And sometimes that is, you've got a very nice person at the top who is too nice to have the tough conversation with somebody who has more power and more influence. It might be a lead technician. It might be an experienced doctor who is a higher revenue earner but treats the other team members like crap. When you allow that behavior to continue, number one, you are in effect endorsing that behavior, and you're giving that person enormous power. But you're also creating an enormous stress in yourself, because if it's in conflict with who your values are, you are not going to be happy. It's not the right thing to do. So the number one thing that I say to people is to start to have those difficult conversations, because a lot of the time it's because people aren't actually aware of the impact they're having on others. They're doing exactly what I was when I wasn't the recovering veterinary asshole. They're putting their head down thinking the universe revolves around them, and they're doing their very best to get through the days. But they've got a misguided version of what okay looks like and how it's okay to treat people. And that might be that their parents didn't tell them off enough, or they had some bad role models. Well, now's the time to step up and be that good role model and actually take somebody aside and go, hey, let's just have a talk about that. And that can be a very scary thing to do, especially if it's in the culture, in the climate of, it's hard to recruit people right now. If you have a high earner and that's going to impact you, or you're going to have to go to work a bit more because somebody you had a conversation with decided to leave and go be the most important person someplace else and wreck somebody else's culture. But in the long term, the payoff for you is huge if you can create an island of excellence culture, because you don't have a long while to wait to recruit people into your business if you have that. So let me give you, you asked for a solid takeaway, and I want to offer you one, which is how to get into those conversations where somebody's a problem. Okay. And I want to also tell you the backstory very briefly to this. This is one of my attendees within my VetX community. She's a student. She's in her 4th year in vet school over in Germany. She came to me not able to speak a lot of English, but she wanted to learn, and she brought herself into the community, and she started seeing practice in some UK places, and now she can speak English. Incredibly courageous girl who wants to do cool things in this world with veterinary medicine. So she was seeing practice in a clinic in Germany, and the surgeon there was giving her a pretty hard time, bullying her, as far as I could tell. I'm only getting one side of the story, so but sounded quite bullying surgeon-esque behavior. You don't have a hard time believing that's possible, right? If you've ever met a surgeon. So so she said, what I do, I don't know what to do. I'm really struggling with this behavior. And I said, okay, well, listen, why don't you, and this will take some courage from you, but I want you to say these 4 things to this person. I want you to take them aside and just describe what they just did to you. Describe the impact that what they just did to you had on you. How did it make you feel? Ask them, was that their intention to do that? And it's pretty much that simple. So, hey, can I just have a little word? The other day when you said this to me, you said these things to me. So describe the thing. The impact, like what I understood from that was that you don't appreciate my work. I feel like kind of crappy about that. And honestly, it's shredding my confidence. And, so there's the impact. It's shredding my confidence. I'm starting to wonder whether I'm good enough to be in this profession or do this. Was that your intention? The end, right? Just do those. And there's probably a 1A and B in there. Okay. So what happened? What did that mean to you? Or what did you understand by it? What was the impact of that upon you? Was that their intention? Now she went and she had this conversation, and she would have been shaken like a leaf knowing that she was. And to the surgeon's credit, they went, I need to think about that. Thank you for letting me know. And she went away for the weekend. Now she came back on the Monday and she called the student into her office, and the student's thinking, this is it. This is the end. I'm not going to be in the practice anymore. This is awful. And the person said, so I thought really hard about what you said, and I spent the time with my family in the weekend, and I really wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was okay. I was kind of confused about it. I was angry. I was all these things. But I asked my family and I said, listen, I've had this bit of feedback. What do you think? And they went, you are kind of an asshole when you get stressed. And she went, right. And that's not okay. And so she pulled her in her office and she said, so thank you, because that took courage. And their relationship, it changed like that in a heartbeat. And that person then started mentoring, purposefully, intentionally mentoring that person, to the point where she grew enough that the practice asked her to stay and was paying her €400 to come in a month and be their extern in that clinic. Now that's the power that one conversation that can have. And if a 4th-year student can have that conversation with a client, then many Nicols does a muckle.
That's a really great way to kind of come a little bit of a full circle on this. And I know we've gone a little bit longer than usual, but It's my fault. No, it's my fault to come to find out that whatever I was drinking last night had me sending the wrong link out in the reminder email. So thank God some of you found your way here, and I have a lot of apologizing due to a few people who couldn't. But I do want to say on the upside of things, there's been some really great insight that has come along. Good. So if you guys have a couple more minutes to hang around, and Dave, if you've got a couple more minutes,
absolutely.
Let's see if anybody has a couple questions that they would like to ask Dave, and then we can do our parting toast and go off into our St. Patty's Day sunrise or sunset, depending upon where you are, I guess. And then this will be recorded and shared out with everybody too, so you will get to hear the front part of it that you missed because it was quite engaging. And, maybe we can even talk Dave into coming back another time when I can get the right link out to everybody. So anyway.
The caveat there is that I've actually got a practice left after Boris Johnson shuts Britain down, and we don't have any customers coming in. But that's another problem entirely.
It's going to be straight into politics. This is deadly ground, I feel like, at the moment.
I know. I kept it UK.
I have a question for you, Dave.
Yes.
Can I, have you copyrighted the term dumpster fire for dentistry? Because I may steal that if you haven't.
I haven't, and you don't copyright it, but I'm sure it's like, yeah, no, it's a good one, huh?
No, I've just thought of a whole presentation I can create out of that. So thank you.
It's a good one for sure. Yeah. So, Allie or Carrie, Sue, Jory, any questions that you guys have for Dave, or anything you want us to dig into a little bit more before we say goodbye? Again, we really appreciate Dave's time and all of your time for being here at this unusual Bridge Club hour.
Indeed. I appreciate that you guys showed up because it is an awkward hour for you in practice. So I appreciate that. And next time I'll come on 3 pints into the evening at like midnight, and then you'll really hear me talk.
Allie, did you have a question? I said you were on mute. Did you have a?
No, I just wanted to thank everyone. I don't practice veterinary medicine, but I work from home. And so right now I'm feeling extra isolated because typically during the day I can at least go out to the market or go to yoga. And now I'm completely cut off from the world. So this is where I'm getting my social interactions and learning. And so I really just wanted to say thank you so much to the Bridge Club, and thank you for this forum. It's a lovely way to stay connected in these weird times. So thank you.
And to add to that, Brenda and I are going to start a virtual happy hour every Friday while all this is happening, starting at 5 o'clock Central Standard Time. You do not have to register. It is literally going to be just dial in with your beverage. It may just be Brenda and I catching up. It will not be recorded. It is purely to connect. And then what we're also going to do is because I think everyone on here is an all access member, or if you're not, please be one. And we're going to have some connectivity points too, just for that purpose, because we do feel that for many of us who may do conference calls, but you don't get to see people's faces, the idea that people do need that connectivity these days if you are not in practice. So we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that we all get through this just fine.
Thank you.
We'll post that on the website too, so that link will be perpetually on the website.
Yep.
Under our
Won't change. We won't have to worry about Brenda sending out the wrong one.
I know, God, I know. I'm so sorry. Jeez, I usually pretty good about double checking things. And last night I was just racing through, getting as much done as I could. And damn if I didn't make a mistake. But thank you for forgiving me. Thank you in advance. All of you who didn't get to come and hear the video, I'm really sorry.
We're perfectly okay with it. We've all done it.
Okay, so Dave, any parting thoughts before you give the closing toast?
I think the most important thought, I think, for anybody with interest in leadership is that the journey starts within, and that you are holding everything else up if you're doing a good job, but you're also holding everything else up if you're doing a bad job. Just a different kind of holding everything else up. Your business will go better, your practice will go better, your life will be happier if you develop really good, modern, best practice leadership skills. And we like evidence, right? It's an evidence-based practice. The old school Victorian, factory foreman, like, beat everybody up, yell at everybody, do it my way. It wasn't very good in the first instance. And if your team is staffed by 80% millennial female workforce, well, you let me know how that goes. Good luck with that. So there you go.
On that happy note, Dave, close us with a toast.
All right. So I have a toast. I take this on me everywhere where I travel. And it reminds me of the reason that I do things, and I think is very important. We all have solid purpose in our life. So my final toast is simply to make sure that what you do with intent, with good purpose, with joy in your heart. So my toast is to my wonderful daughter and all the people I love in my life, including all of you whom I'm honored to have the privilege to work with.
Cheers.
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 Thank you, everyone, for being here, for continuing to support the Bridge Club. Catherine and I appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts.